Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast for April 28th, 2022. I am Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan in Montreal, Canada, where it is almost getting to the point of spring, Mark. I'm starting to feel optimism for green shoots of grass and leaves in the not too distant future.
Yeah, well, we're heading into winter down in Brazil, but, it's about 28 degrees here today. And, if I was back in England or Scotland, then that would be a fine summer's day.
Well, this is it. And, I still anticipate winter in Brazil is going to be infinitely better temperature-wise than summer in Canada. But hey, who knows? With climate change, everything is on the table.
Well, this week we've got an interesting interview with Stephen van Belleghem. Stephen's based in Belgium, and he's well known in the CX industry for his frequent keynote speeches, and he's published 4 books on CX now. He's a professor at Vlerick Business School, and he's also a guest speaker at London Business School as well. He's well known for giving the kind of high-level future of CX ideas, and certainly in this interview I picked up on some of his points around customer loyalty and how a lot of brands really need to get real about loyalty. I really liked some of his ideas around instead of retailers having loyalty schemes where you pick up points, the things that we all know and generally hate actually, because they never seem to give you very many rewards. But he was suggesting that retailers like Walmart may just create their own cryptocurrency, and they give you that cryptocurrency as a reward. And the value fluctuates depending on how popular the brand is at the time. So more customers go to that brand, then your reward points end up being worth more. So he has lots of interesting ideas about how things should change and how the customer themselves should be valued more.
And I think that Stephen brings a lot of really good ideas to the table, from the standpoint of what he's talking about with regards to customer loyalty. I think he's right. The same customer loyalty schemes have been deployed over the course of the past 30 years, whether you're talking about AirPoint schemes, whether you're talking about grocery store schemes. I can remember when I was living in the UK back in the early 2000s, they had the Nectar card at Sainsbury's, and I believe the Nectar card is still in existence. That's fine. But how much have these different elements evolved with how consumers are purchasing things? It's no longer a case of walking into a department store or walking into a supermarket, going out, buying a bunch of things, giving your card as you check out and taking off from there. Consumers have a lot more sophistication. Their needs, their interests have evolved a lot more. And what Stephen's, I think, putting out there has a lot of resonance because it's challenging the status quo that unfortunately I think a lot of providers don't want challenged, because it's just easy to get into that almost channel that they're in regards to how they manage customer loyalty. And as long as their customers are coming back, that's all they seem to think about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that a lot of the stuff that drives what Stephen talks about is this emotive CX, the idea that you need to sort of insert yourself into the lifestyle of the customer and become something that's valued. We're not just talking about transactions and purchases. We're talking about people actually appreciating a brand and then developing a relationship that may last for many years or even decades. And this is something we've seen industries like the auto industry looking at, how do you keep on getting someone to keep buying from the same brand for many years? But I think we're seeing that spread across many other industrial sectors now.
Yeah, and let's be perfectly frank. We all have brands that we're particularly loyal to. And you mentioned the automotive sector. You could talk about certain financial services products. I know that I'm personally very loyal and love American Express. And that might sound crazy to some people, but there's always going to be an alignment that individuals have to particular products or services and the brands that align with them. I know an oft-used one would be Apple. If we're talking in the automotive space, again, Tesla seems to be developing that. the level of loyalty. When it comes to athletic gear, just again referencing myself, Mark, Adidas is something that I have always gravitated to and probably always will, not just because the quality is great, but their products always seem to fit me first time out. And if we're talking about developing these emotive connections between brands and the consumers, there's some great examples out there, but I think that more organizations, regardless of the industry that they're in, have to try and figure out what they need to do to almost develop that level of increased stickiness that only emotion can drive.
Yeah, and I think that there's lots of practical examples where this can be applied. We're really talking about the fact that the human touch is not dead. Although we've seen so much digital transformation, so many brands trying to automate the entire customer journey. At some point, it still helps to be able to relate to a human at the brands that you love, and that's something that comes across really strongly in the interview with him.
It does come across very strongly, and I agree completely that there has to be that human element. There's got to be that level of personalization that in many cases you can get to through a digital interaction, but at a certain point a human has got to be able to come into the play if it's going to be able to enhance the relationship, if it's going to be able to ensure a cross-sell or an upsell, or if it's going to be to save a relationship. The reality is, we've talked for years about what AI and automation can do in the context of driving great CX, but that need for the human element is always going to be there and should not be disparaged.
Okay, so let's go straight to the interview with Steven van Belleghem on emotive CX and the future of customer loyalty. Okay, Steven, it's great to have you on the podcast. Now, I know that during the pandemic, you published your book, The Offer You Can't Refuse. And this was themed around automation and the transformation of CX. But how would you update that book? I mean, if you could account for some of the changes in work that have taken place during COVID, would you edit that, or would a second edition look different now?
Well, I think, Mark, that the core of the story would be more or less the same. It's basically a very simple philosophy where I say, okay, the product and services and a competitive price are a minimum demand to make customers happy. Everyone knows this. But what we've seen, and I think this is something that has been accelerated because of COVID, digital convenience is now also a commodity. It's something that people find natural. Convenience used to be a positive differentiator. Today, it's a negative differentiator. If you have it, people think it's obvious. If you don't have it, it's going to frustrate them and they're going to leave you. So you cannot win anymore. It became a hygiene factor. So what you see in CX is that transactional relationship is more and more the norm. So the question is, how can we make a difference? And that's where I really like to inspire people, to help them find ways and strategies to create a more emotional strategy for your customers. And there I work with two dimensions, two options that you can work on. The first one is what I call partner in life, where it's not about optimizing the customer journey, it's about optimizing the life journey. It's not about knowing your customer, it's about understanding your customer and acting upon that. And once you can create, or let me put it differently, the more empathy you have for the life of your customers, the better you understand the human behind the customer, the more value you can bring in their day-to-day life. And that's the partner in life philosophy. And then a second dimension you can invest in is creating positive change in the world, adding value to society, taking your responsibility in a way that goes beyond sustainability, because that will also become the norm, but really looking at the core strength that you have and asking yourself, how can I apply that strength to make a difference towards customers? And adding all this together means that you have 4 layers that you can invest in to win the heart and the business of your customers. You need that great product and service. You need that digital convenience. You make a difference by being a partner in life and by creating positive change for society. And those 4 layers individually create value for a customer. But if you add them all together, that's when you reach that offer you cannot refuse. And that's very briefly pitched the story that I bring in my book. And I think that COVID accelerated the need for that emotional relationship. I think COVID accelerated the fact that digital is becoming a commodity. So the urgency to think in this direction has increased in the last couple of years.
I think that idea of the partner in life is really interesting, because I think that when we look at a lot of CX design, and especially when we look at companies that need to interact with their customers and then they hire a partner to handle that process, quite often they're just measuring those individual transactions or the engagement that takes place. And yet, as you're talking about in the book, you need to sort of insert the brand into the lifestyle of the customer and make it something that they emotionally value. So how do you talk to, let's say, CX directors, people who are running a customer service function, and talk to them and say, look, we need to be thinking about the next 30 or 40 years relationship with that customer rather than just that individual one phone call?
I think the crucial question that CX leaders have to ask themselves is our customer service, our customer experience, is it real? Is it like an oasis in the desert, or is it a fata morgana that only our leadership team can see? And usually I do a small assessment and ask them 3 questions to find out how real their customer experience is. And the first question is, how do you deal with opposing interests? Sometimes there's an opposing interest between you and your customer, right? They want to get their money back and you want to keep their money. Very simple example. You're a telco and you know that a customer has a sleeping account or a sleeping subscription, but you cash in that money month after month, even though you know that they're not using it. That's an opposing interest. You could call them and repay them for what they paid for and didn't get any value for, or you can let the money come in and you can say, you know what, they didn't cancel the contract, so I'm not doing anything wrong. That's an opposing interest. Basically answering the question, are you willing to hurt yourself in the short run to gain trust in the long run? That's question number 1. Second question is, do you have a always fix it mentality? When something goes wrong, do you fix things first and then talk to the customer? Or do you first do this whole investigation to find out who actually made the mistake, if it's truly your mistake or if the customer is responsible for the mistake? And you do this whole investigation like you're the FBI or the CIA, and you waste time. It frustrates your customer, and you have this whole situation where no one is happy anymore. Fix it first, always. I think that's what you need to create this oasis of customer experience. And then the third one is, how empowered is the frontline staff? How far can your employees go to help customers? When do they reach the point where they need to ask their manager to see if they can actually help this customer? As a customer, if you hear the sentence, we will have to ask our manager, or I'm not responsible for this, then you're completely screwed. So how far is that question out for the frontline staff? That's question number 3. And these 3 questions actually give me a great assessment and a great feeling about the customer culture that an organization has. Because, everyone is so obsessed with technology. We're talking about AI, we're talking about blockchain, Web3, Metaverse. We're all in this technology thing. But I think at the end of the day, what you need to do as a company is to create positive change for the customer. The day that you can create positive change in the life of the customer, that's the moment that you will win. And that is something that you can control. You cannot control what Mark Zuckerberg will do with the Metaverse. You have to wait and see, but you can control creating positive change. And I think that's the key focus for all CX leaders, really focusing on that positive change in the world.
And you mentioned a few different technologies there. And that's a recurring theme that I keep on hearing is we need a digital transformation, or we need to accelerate digital transformation. And I've seen you writing before about actually we need more of a human transformation of the customer relationship. So what do you mean by that? And how do we avoid just going down this digital path and losing the human touch in customer service?
Well, if you look to the role of digital in CX, it's about creating convenience and it's about personalization. Those are like the 2 things that are really crucial in the world of CX and customers and technology, sorry. But we've reached that point. I mean, if you haven't successfully transformed your interactions to convenient platforms, if you haven't personalized your communication and your platforms for customers, I mean, you're in deep trouble right now. So the main digital part in CX is done, in my opinion. And of course, we have Metaverse, we have blockchain, and that will change things again. But the basis, the fundamentals should be done by now. So to make a difference, the human interface is far more differentiating today than the digital interface, because it's harder. It's harder to make a difference with humans than to make a difference with technology. And you know, we can almost see the evolution of work in front of our eyes. In the past, people worked with their hands. Today, people work with their brain. In the future, as a human, if you want to make a difference towards customers, it's about working from the heart, because that is something that a machine cannot do. That means that as a human today, we need to excel in those fields where computers are not good at. And then I look at qualities like empathy, compassion, creativity, enthusiasm, passion. Those are all human qualities that deliver value to a customer in a way that a machine cannot bring it to the customer. So that's where the core change and potential wins are for organizations to make a difference towards their customers. In my opinion, the more digital the world will become, the more valuable the human relationship will be towards customers.
And that's an interesting point, because I wanted to ask you about this idea of ambient CX.
Okay.
Steve, the analyst Stephen Lloyd, I think, coined this term, where he was describing where our phone will constantly react to us just by talking to it, where you can talk to Alexa in your home. So instead of having to seek out a customer service phone number and make a call and wait to get an agent, we just say things like, you know, hey, Alexa, why can't I get my Samsung TV to work? And so there's this sort of ambience. It's always there and always available. I mean, does this idea change the approach? I mean, do brands need to be thinking about how do we respond to these kind of sort of immediate customer questions in a completely different channel? Yeah,
well, time is the scarcest resource that people have. So we are not willing to invest our precious time into the digital incompetence of some brand. So it will always, or we will always go to the most convenient solution. And as I mentioned, if you're not convenient, you're not going to be playing the game anymore. But at the same time, being extremely convenient, understanding that voice is something that is increasing convenience, for instance, that is for me just a small step forward in this whole evolution from a little bit of effort to zero effort. And eventually for customers, it will end up with zero effort for all transactional parts of the relationship. That's where the direction is going. And AI will improve, voice will improve, but we can already know the end game. It will end up with zero effort. And zero effort is really cool. That means that, for instance, for your weekly groceries that you need to buy, that you will not have to push a button, that you will not have to say anything, that it will just be automated and it comes to you. So it's like the extreme version of the convenience that we have today. But then again, if we reach that point, it's going to be a hygiene factor really, really fast. And the change and the win will always be in the human part, the positive energy, creating positive change in lives of customers. But without extreme convenience, you don't have the ticket to ride. So you need the ticket to ride, the extreme convenience. The ticket to win is creating the positive change for customers.
You mentioned the metaverse a minute ago and said that maybe some of these tools that at the moment we don't have a lot of control over, maybe we shouldn't be worried too much about them. But at the same time, do you see that there are any particular types of service or company that might be exploring these areas before others? I mean, are there already use cases that are actually seeing real demonstrated use cases from the metaverse?
Well, there's this whole hype of Web3 and Metaverse. And I think that if you translate that to our field of customer experience, that they have the potential to create new customer benefits. I think that the whole evolution of Metaverse will create enhanced experiences. It will be from very efficient experiences to more creative experiences. Disney is working on that, for instance, where they dream that in the future, their theme parks will have this digital layer, this augmented layer on top of it. And I can imagine that that will be really cool. If you're waiting in line for Space Mountain and you have to wait for an hour, that it's not the most boring moment of your day, but that you can actually see and experience a whole different world thanks to that metaverse in those Disney parks. So I can really see a difference there, enhanced experiences. If you look at the Web3 and blockchain technology, one of the consequences will be that privacy will come back to the customer, that data ownership will come back to the customer, that for the customer, it will be so easy to decide who will get access to your data and who will not get access to your data. That's a benefit. But the one that excites me most is that the whole evolution of NFTs and Web3 has the potential, in my opinion, to reinvent customer loyalty. Whereas a customer, you get more skin in the game. And an example that I like to use is from the music industry. Imagine that you are the new Ed Sheeran, that you are a very talented and gifted singer-songwriter, but you're not, I mean, no one wants to give you a record deal. So you cannot find this contract to get you started. In the old days, that was game over. Today, in this world of NFTs, this shouldn't be a problem. If you have, for instance, a following on TikTok or YouTube where you share your music, you could create an NFT with your music, sell that to your early community, and you could include a smart contract in which you say, look, 90% of the revenues of this music are for me, the artist, and 10% will be spread among the early investors in my music, which is a good deal for the customer, the fan. They get some part of the revenue, but it's also a good deal for the artist, because in the old world, if you get a record deal, the truth is 90% of the money goes to the record company and 10% goes to the artist. Now with the NFT programming and the smart contracts in there, you could actually keep 90% of the revenue and create a very active fan community that knows that, okay, if this singer-songwriter becomes more successful, then I'm going to make more money. So they're not just customers, they're not just fans, they're active ambassadors, because it's a shared interest. The interest of the artist is the same as the interest of the fan, the customer. And if you think about this philosophy, this could change customer loyalty. Imagine that a company like Walmart would create its own virtual coin, the wall coin, for instance, and that as a replacement for traditional loyalty cards, where with traditional loyalty cards, you need to spend a lot of money, and after a while you get this reward. So basically loyalty starts from the customer, and after a while you get something back from the company. If you create your own coin, then loyalty starts from the organization, because they're giving you a coin, and if they perform well, instantly you will get rewarded as a customer. It's like a branded economy that you create. And I think this has the potential to completely redefine the customer loyalty game in a way that it's much more relevant for a customer to become loyal to an organization, because the benefits are at par. Today, in most loyalty systems, the benefits for the company are higher than the benefits for the customer. And that's the flaw in the system of customer loyalty today that could be changed with these new technologies.
Well, I wanted to close out by asking you about the future, because many of your books actually look to the future of CX, and you've just done a great job of summarizing perhaps the future of customer loyalty. But is there anything else that is exciting you and perhaps we should be looking for in the 2020s as something that might be changing the world of CX?
Yeah, and I don't think it has to do with technology. I think it has to do with emotions. I think many organizations have been focusing on the transactional part. They've been optimizing their touch points. I think that the winners in the next decade will be the ones with the highest power in their customer culture, where they really make a difference as a whole on a macro level towards their customers, where it probably won't just be about having efficient touch points, but where it will be, what's your mindset in between touch points? Is your staff, are your teams really understanding customers? Are they screening what's happening so that they can create positive change, help them out, have a service mindset in an unexpected place? Like in a hotel, you have these basic touch points where you want to score points, right? You have the check-in, you have the cleaning of the rooms, you have maybe the bar, the restaurant, very well-defined, predefined moments. But what if someone is really suffering with their suitcase somewhere in a hallway? How will the staff react when they see something like that? That's an in-between touch point moment. And understanding the in-between touch points and acting upon that will be part of the customer culture that an organization has. And if you do that on a higher level, and you understand that you're not just selling products, but you're trying to create positive change in the life of customers. And if you have that mindset implemented in your day-to-day, I think those will be the winners of tomorrow. Much more than, focusing on any kind of new technology that pops around the corner.
Right, Stephen, that's great. I know that your most recent book came out just over a year ago, but it feels like yesterday because of the pandemic. So I'll include a link in the show notes.
Super, thank you.
That's perfect. But some great insights there. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me in the show, Mark. It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.